As fun as many of the mercenary units are throughout the Stronghold series, I can't help but feel them misplaced, like they're not really something that should be part of the Stronghold formula. Stronghold at its heart is a production economic game. Your people produce goods through production buildings, often as part of a chain, and those production chains are what fuel your army. Mercenaries just don't fit that mould. They are instantly created for a sum of gold as long as the peasants are available, completely detaching themselves from the core Stronghold formula. So in today's video I'll be taking a look at mercenaries throughout the series, sharing my thoughts on their impact on the Stronghold formula, and what direction I think Firefly should take moving forward. So let's start with two games in the series, Stronghold 1 and Stronghold 3, where mercenaries aren't available to the player. Every military unit except armed peasants in Stronghold 3 had to be made by producing the required weapons and having a peasant available.
Morning, your lordship.
That meant setting up your production buildings as soon as possible was absolutely crucial. Balancing your resources for maximum archer production was key to success in almost any invasion scenario. The specific resources and workshops required to produce units forced the player to think carefully about what units they wanted to focus on. And that really set Stronghold and its most authentic sequel, Stronghold 3, apart in their take on the RTS formula. Your castle economy and your military were intertwined, and it was magic and something truly unique to Stronghold.
Weapons needed, sire.
The first game to introduce mercenaries was Stronghold Crusader, and this completely shifted the series in a much faster paced direction, focused on skirmishes between players and various AI lords. Suddenly the barracks was joined by a mercenary post. Units could be instantly recruited for gold as long as peasants were available.
Recruits needed, sire.
These units represented Arabian armies, and were the units selected by Arab lords such as Saladin and the Caliph, and to be fair, they're great, they're iconic. But they also fundamentally changed the gameplay formula. Players can suddenly change their army compositions instantly. The production chains that made acquiring units in Stronghold 1 so unique disappeared. The game split into two separate systems, one economic and one instant. Instead of tying military to production, players could now focus entirely on happiness and taxes, go full gold economy, and churn out Arabian units instantly.
Please, sire. I have a family to support.
That trade-off between economy and military that defined the original game, it started to fade. With Stronghold 2 and Stronghold Legends, Firefly returned to a European setting, and didn't have a clear cultural divide between factions, so they decided to experiment with the mercenary idea. In Stronghold 2 we got thieves that could rob your opponent's treasury, and Pictish boatmen who could paddle across the sea. And in Stronghold Legends we got mythical units, Knights of the Round Table, witches, and my personal favourite, the werewolf.
Was right about something. The wolf is inside me all the time. And I don't know where that line is anymore between me and it.
Once again, the system divided the Stronghold formula into two, but out of every Stronghold game I think these titles had the strongest justification for that divide. In Stronghold 2, the mercenary units all felt like units that fit into the time frame of the Dark Ages, whereas the barracks units that required production chains felt more elite and from the later Middle Ages. And because of the honour system, mercenaries weren't just spam units. They required your lord to rise up in the ranks and large amounts of honour. Ninjas weren't just popping out left, right and centre.
We will spring from nowhere.
Legends takes the system even further. Instead of mercenary posts, we get the Round Table for Arthur, the Ice Tower for the Ice faction, and the Sorcerer's Tower for Evil. This is the only time Stronghold ever had truly unique factions, rather than universal units. All mythical units only require gold and honour, and no weapons. It's honestly a great use of the mercenary system, they feel truly unique, but it still creates a divide. And personally, I've always wished the mythical units had their own production chains. Imagine mythical buildings producing mythical weapons for mythical creatures. Although not every fantasy unit needs a weapon. Dragons, vampire bats, creepers wouldn't fit, so some instant production would still need to be necessary.
Where are my true knights now? In this, our time of need!
Crusader 2 and Warlords take the formula right back to that of the original Stronghold Crusader. We get mercenary units of similar strength to production-based units, but without meaningful distinction. To be fair, both games do expand the production-based roster with great units like the Ranger, Templar Knight and Imperial Guardsman, some of which require clever combinations of weapons like swords and bows for Rangers or mace and armour for the Templar. But even with that progress, it feels like mercenaries were mainly added to make combat faster.
Hit them now! Hit them hard!
Apart from speeding up gameplay in the early game, there's no strong reason why Arabian units couldn't be production based. They're holding weapons, they're not fantasy units, they're not mythical, so why bypass the core formula? Why not make the whirling dervish require 2 swords and cost slightly less gold? Why not require a bow and a horse for a horse archer? It would prevent the spamming that is so common in multiplayer. The system feels split for the sake of speed, not for the sake of identity. After being gifted with new production-based units in Crusader 2, I had high hopes when Crusader Definitive Edition was announced that we might get some new European units on the battlefield.
Good day, my friends, and welcome back to the desert with Stronghold Crusader Definitive Edition.
But instead we got the Bedouin camp and 8 new Bedouin units, all of which are instantly built. As much as I love many of the new units like the Healer, Camel Lancer and Eunuch, I can't help but feel we got these units because it was a far easier option than adding new buildings and economic systems for European units. For me, it's a missed opportunity. It also feels odd to have new units as their own thing, separate to Arab and European units. I guess the idea was to make the new lords like the Kaheen and the Nomad have their own unique selection of units. Either way, it shows the Stronghold series is going further and further away from production-based unit systems, and it's a shame. We could have had camel stables and boulder and missile production for siege units like gunpowder production that we saw in Stronghold Warlords. But hey, one can only dream. My biggest fear is that Firefly are focused more and more on gold-based recruitment, and less on workshops rooted in a production economy. Although we've seen a small expansion of barracks units in Stronghold Crusader 2 and Warlords, other than Stronghold 3, we haven't had an entry that removed mercenaries entirely. In Stronghold Crusader Definitive Edition, the primary new feature is the Bedouin units, and the lords they inspire, which shows that Firefly's focus is on expanding the unit roster, rather than expanding the production systems inside the player's castle. And for me, that's a real shame. I hope that in Firefly's next entry, Stronghold the Dark Ages, they return to the design philosophy of Stronghold 1 and Stronghold 3. I'd love to see all units require specific weapons to produce, bar peasants and monks, as we've seen in previous entries. And honestly, I think it would be refreshing to see the mercenary system disappear for a game, allowing Firefly to focus on what makes Stronghold truly unique, its production-driven economy. For me, the core identity of Stronghold is its castle economy, and the best entries in the series are the ones where your castle, your infrastructure, fuels your military. If you enjoyed this breakdown of Stronghold's mercenaries and what they mean for the series moving forward, be sure to leave a like. It helps more than you think. And make sure to sub for all things Stronghold. And let me know in the comments, do you think mercenaries belong in the Stronghold series? Do you agree with my take and think they suit some entries far more than others? Or do you prefer the pure production economy formula? Thanks for watching.